Kent Beck published his test desiderata to help developers write better tests with useful properties, because desiderata is a fancy word that means desirable properties. I looked carefully at these 12 desiderata and came to the conclusion something is missing, possibly several things. Since then, I have studied about 25 lists of desirable test properties from many well-known authors, not just Kent Beck, and I still think he's missing something. I want to propose an update to the test desiderata. Test desiderata 2.0. Hi, I'm Emily Bache. I'm a software developer and creator of Salman Coaching. Welcome to the Modern Software Engineering channel. If you enjoy the video today, please hit like and consider subscribing. We are several presenters here with a common goal to bring you great advice on the technical aspects of software engineering. Kent Beck invented the test desiderata in 2019. He noticed that people were designing tests badly and seemed to take it for granted that that was just how tests were. The desiderata was a way to help people write better tests. You could kind of say, well, look here, your tests should have these properties. And if yours don't, then you're missing something. And I applaud this idea. Helping people write better tests is a large part of my work as a technical coach. In fact, I also support this idea of having lists of important properties. Back in 2013, I published my list with 4 items. My list does not map perfectly to Beck's list. You may know that I'm a long-term proponent and user of approval tests, and I think it's fair to say Kent Beck isn't. Could that be why I have things on my list that he doesn't? Let me make an analogy with shoes. An imagined shoe desiderata. This could help you to determine what makes a good pair of shoes and help you to check that you have a good selection of shoes in your wardrobe. There are good tests like there are good shoes. At some level, all of these provide protection. Tests from mistakes, shoes from weather and dirt. Beyond that, though, you're going to need more than one kind of shoes or tests. So, shoe desiderata. This could include comfortable, stylish, waterproof, quick to take on and off, keep my feet the right temperature. You can take a particular pair of shoes and assess them against these criteria, but usually you wouldn't find one pair of shoes that fulfills all of them. That would be some kind of snow boot / flip-flop hybrid. As Beck says of his test desiderata, you make trade-offs. He says, no property should be given up without receiving a property of greater value in return. So with shoes, I could give up stylish if I get waterproof and keeps my feet warm in the snow. Or I could give up comfortable if I get high heels that look amazing at a party and make me feel awesome and powerful, at least until my feet hurt so much I have to sit down. The thing with Kent Beck's test desiderata is I think it's a bit like he's never experienced high heels, and consequently he's got this big gap in his wardrobe assessment system. Just a minute, I must stress, I have no idea if Kent has actually ever tried wearing high heels. This is just a thought experiment. My thesis is that Beck's test desiderata is incomplete because he has never experienced good approval tests. So I wanted to add some properties to his model. But then I thought, maybe other people have also suggested additional properties. I don't have a monopoly on unusual styles of tests. There are more kinds of shoes out there than Kent or I have in our wardrobes. I could learn something by looking at what other people say as well. Okay, so I spent some time looking at as many lists of good test properties as I could lay my hands on, trying to understand where they overlap and where they differ. So I started out with Beck's 12 desiderata as columns in a table and made a row for each other author's list. And I tried to map each of their items onto one or more of Beck's properties, and if I failed, put it in a new column at the end. I wanted to see if any desiderata were rarely mentioned, what additional ones there were, and whether actually some people had better names for some of the desiderata. I'm not sure I like all the names. Okay, so I started out looking at lists of other presenters on this channel. I had lists from Dave Farley and Kevlin Henney, and I added other ones that people suggested when I asked on social media, and I ended up with about 24 different authors. Now, of course, my analysis is subjective, based on my interpretation of Beck's desiderata and all of these authors' different perspectives. But I think it's slightly more scientific than just me saying, Kent, you forgot this one. Although my sample is still relatively small and almost certainly biased towards extreme programming enthusiasts. Hopefully this is interesting though. So after my analysis, I do still think that Beck is missing some desiderata. I found about 10 new candidates that I could add, but it turned out I noticed something else that was very surprising. There are 2 desiderata that really stick out. I mean, really. Most desiderata were kind of in the middle, mentioned by several people, but not everyone. But these 2 were different. Tests should be fast. Basically, every list I looked at had this property on it. And the other one that stuck out was predictive. None of the other lists mentioned this, like none of them. So fast is perhaps easy to explain. Fast tests give you feedback sooner, and feedback is essential to good engineering. All the authors I looked at are excellent engineers who clearly want fast feedback to do their job. Predictive though, why do they all miss that one? At this point, I want to bring back my shoe desiderata. All of those, comfortable, waterproof, all of those things will help you to assess an individual pair of shoes. But actually what you're interested in is whether your entire wardrobe contains all the pairs of shoes that you need for the weather conditions and the social calendar that you're likely to face. If all your tests are really, really fast, but they miss crucial production bugs, then it's clear you need more kinds of shoes. Tests. Of course you always need more shoes. In Beck's desiderata, predictive means if I run all my tests, it's a good prediction of whether your software is free of all substantial defects and is suitable for delivery to production. And that is a property of all your entire suite of tests, not just one of them, which is perhaps why not many other people are calling this out explicitly as something they want from their tests, because most people are focusing on the individual pairs of shoes, not the entire wardrobe. Fast is an interesting property because it applies both to one individual test as well as the whole suite. But one individual test can't possibly be predictive all by itself. When I began this study, I was hoping to be able to say, look, Kent, you forgot these desiderata. Me and all these other people say so. But actually, that's not really what happened. I have a much more interesting suggestion. Let's first consider all of the desiderata for your entire wardrobe before we start to pick out particular pairs of shoes. So, for your entire test suite, it must be fast to run and predictive of deployment success. I don't think you can keep those 2 things in the same list of desiderata as all the rest. These are much more important. They directly support the engineering process. But they're not enough. There is a third thing that you're going to trade off against them: money. You want to minimize the total cost of ownership. So, with this insight, I went back through my analysis again and grouped all of the desirable properties from everybody's list by which of these 3 things it was going to support. Is this property of an individual test going to make it faster for the same level of prediction, or cheaper for the same level of prediction, or improve the prediction power? When I went through all of the original 12 desiderata, plus the additional ones I'd found already in my analysis, almost all of them fit this model. Win! Almost everything we talk about will either make tests faster, better predictive, or reduce their cost. And actually there's a lot of ways to reduce costs in tests. But there were some properties that didn't fit this model, pointing at a 4th macro property of test suites that we also care about. Now, can you think what this might be? What else could be important for a test suite as a whole, other than it being fast, predicting success, being cheap to own? It's the part of owning shoes that happens before you buy them. Now, I hope I haven't stretched this analogy too far. While you're deciding what kind of shoes to get, you're trying on different pairs, you're walking around, you're looking in the mirror, All the time you're getting valuable information about yourself and what suits you and what you want. In software, the part where we develop the tests can support us understanding what to build and in developing the detailed code design. Particularly in behavior-driven development and test-driven development, this is really clear. Tests are directly supporting you to build something in small slices. They document your design choices. They can give you a positive design pressure on your production code for better APIs, smaller modules, all that kind of thing. We go on about this on this channel like all the time. Even if you're not doing behavior-driven development or TDD, you probably use tests as part of your documentation for the code, and you might go and read them when you're adding new features. In a shoe purchasing situation, you don't keep all your shoes that you try on. And this probably is where the analogy breaks down. With software, we are always developing and changing it and buying new shoes. So we value tests that will support ongoing design and development. We don't just kind of throw them away. This is the fourth macro property. Okay, well, there's a lot more that I could say about my full analysis, and I hope to follow up with a detailed discussion of all the individual properties that I discovered. But for the moment, I want to leave you with my headline findings. Beck's 12 test desiderata are not complete. They could have better names. But fundamentally, I think the problem with them is they are confusing desirable properties of one particular test with desirable properties of the entire suite. I propose that we instead think in terms of 4 macro desiderata that I find explains all the properties the authors that I studied say that they value in individual test cases. Good software developers are trying to optimize the entire test suite to be fast, predictive, with a low total cost of ownership, and support ongoing development. All the things they say they value about individual tests are helping them with one or more of those 4 overall goals. Happy coding!